Obviously, we won't use this. I'll probably just forget to record, and we just have a chat. So, and then it'd be like, oh yeah, oops.
Woke Asian Guy
and Egg White
and special guest Eric Lampaert.
I did have a chat with my friend about that though. Like, what is freedom of speech for entertainers, right? Because you're technically playing characters, right? Because you've got names, but you're Egg White and Woke Asian. So
Woke Asian
therefore,
guy, yeah.
you're characters, which means that you can actually say whatever you want. I mean, it's so complex, right? Like, do you want things to trail you like in the future? I don't know, and it also depends what you want to say. Like some stuff that you might say might really help someone else, a serial killer, perhaps. So
I know,
who knows?
absolutely. Oh yeah, no. Should we do an introduction for you first as well? Because
hey, you guys are the professionals. You know what you're doing.
We're echelons.
Yeah.
without the prof. Yeah.
I know. Well, basically, we have our first ever actual guest today. Someone who's actually a real life person who's not an impression that either myself or Egg White have made. So
shut the front door.
Shut the front door. So he's an actor, a director, a podcast maker, a stand-up comic, a sit-down comic, an all-round creative talent. Eric Lampaert, welcome to the Woke Asian Guy and Egg White podcast. Now,
hello, gentlemen. Thanks for having me. I didn't realize I was your first.
Yeah, first ever.
It feels good. It feels special. It feels like also I might get used and abused by both of you. Like I'm your first one. I'm your trial boy.
Well, we're just both nervous guys, really. We're just going to go.
But I listened to one of your episodes, and you two you've got some good chemistry. You know what you're doing.
There's a lot of built up to sexual tension. It's because basically
I feel like I'm in safe hands.
We haven't seen each other physically for about 6 months. So this is like the best of friendships, really, because we don't really like each other. So
yeah,
and then once a week we just get on the call and we pretend to like each other.
Yeah,
and that's how it goes.
Pretend to like each other, then.
Is this like an anger management thing?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So I obviously am the token white angry guy, and he's the woke Asian guy. So you've got many hats.
Well, you introduced me, and I was like, oh God, you need so many hats nowadays. You can't just be one thing. It's so, may I swear, like fucking annoying to be like actor, director, writer. It sounds good, and at the same time, it's like choose a lane. I just want to be an actor. That's all I want to do. Maybe a little bit of comedy to the side, but I just want. But there's no directors calling me yet. Where are they? I'm ready for my spotlight.
Well, I'm gonna be spotted in Starbucks. But
we're basically going to save this for a little bit later. But it seems kind of like quite a good moment. Been trying to get a sitcom started.
Hold your horses. This is, to remind you, a parody podcast. These are fictional characters we're talking about with no reference to real life people. Got that? Good. Now let's continue.
Called Jim Davidson is
not
my racist uncle lives in my attic. Now, firstly, there's a few things that you do know. Do you know who Jim Davidson is?
Of course, yeah, big break, baby.
You're fully aware. Yeah, 90s reference, lovely. Yes, and the premise is Wokie is it's Jim Davidson is
not
racist uncle who lives in his attic, and then films his YouTube videos with Katie Hopkins. Now,
the context of it was the fact that I'm actually at home with my family and kids, having no career, and Egg White is my best friend who pops over now and again, and we do podcasts. Then somehow it just evolved. Very meta. So it evolved into the fact that wait a sec, what if that we started talking about Jim Davidson because he's got his YouTube channel, which is not really gone like an interesting angle. It's sort of like being anti-woke and all that. And we thought, wait a sec, what if Jim Davidson was my unofficial uncle and he basically stayed with me and went in my loft? And just basically,
why would he be in your loft? Is he struggling financially?
We want to keep it ambiguous because, lawyers and stuff. So we're just keeping it. Then again, we're actually naming him. So
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Why is he in your loft? That's what I'm intrigued about. Is he really struggling? Like, is he going for a divorce?
He's my long lost uncle.
Shall we say yeah?
He's my long lost uncle, and he's fallen out with everybody. So he's basically,
so he needs a place to
I'm
stay.
the last person. Yeah, he's come to my place looking for a place to stay, then goes into a loft because that's a spare room that we have, and he just starts his podcasting empire in there.
You're the last person that said yes, which means that there's not really a relationship there, right? Okay.
Exactly.
The characters haven't spoken for years ever since. And
is there what's the character arc for both you and Davidson? Like, do you learn from each other? Maybe you could be a little bit not racist by the end, and Jim can be I don't know. Maybe acceptable of a few tribes.
It goes full circle. Yeah.
We're sort of workshopping it at the moment in bits of the podcast and obviously offline as well. So an interesting angle. So he could actually become woke. I think we don't want it to be like Seinfeld.
Friends.
You know, it's like
because that really sounds like Friends, doesn't it?
Joey pops over. I know, like Seinfeld, basically, because Seinfeld was notoriously no hugging, no learning. So no one learned, no one, made up or anything else, and the audience.
I like that. No hugging, no learning. Yeah.
That was their famous motto in it. So I don't want the no hugging, no learning. So we'd actually we learn something from each other, and society becomes better from it.
That is nice. That is nice. Are you doing 6 episodes? Is this like a 6 episode for one series, like the very British method?
We're pitching 6 episodes.
Definitely. 6 episodes.
Okay, definitely.
I feel like you're going to not run into trouble with the title.
Yeah, it's a work in progress title. We can always change it to.
Although it would be amazing if you actually got Jim Davidson.
This is what we're
then
going
everything's
for.
Fine.
Well, this is what we're going for. We're going for him, and hopefully, he's going to do the what was the Curb Your Enthusiasm kind of style of rebrand.
So rebrand Jim. Maybe he does need help, doesn't he?
I mean, the fact that he's living in an Asian household, I'm hoping if we do really well, no one's going to question that and just look at the actual, the story arcs as the conflict actually happens with these 2 characters in the house. And the kids. The kids love their uncle that they haven't seen in years.
You can teach him snooker. That's great.
So we're actually going to give him heart.
You've actually said one of the jokes, so yes. Yeah, that's exactly, that's episode 1.
Uncle Jim, take us to the park.
He doesn't like the kids, but then he ends up kind of
British Curb Your Enthusiasm with Jim Davidson is actually, I think, I could see it happening. I just feel like Jim Davidson is a not racist title. I can see his lawyers and his agents going, I'll tell you what, let's workshop something else.
Let's backtrack on this.
Is it just the word not racist till we go for bigot? I mean, what?
Okay.
So
just as we're workshopping it, we can feel the lawyers just breathing down our neck.
Yeah.
I mean, why you want it, just in case we don't get him? I mean, what's your Jim Davidson impression like?
Oh, it's such a long time ago because, as you know, like I use Big Break as my reference for Jim Davidson. So I don't even know what he sounds like anymore.
So, no one does. So,
Egg White does a good impression.
It's
just all shouting at the TV. I'm getting my point across.
It's basically just gets red in the face, doesn't he? He just gets red in the face and he tries to sort of like that. But
is he a gremlin? Is he a little gremlin?
Yeah. So there's always a part for you in that.
I think I appreciate
we'll workshop
that.
It's there.
Who would I be? Like, as a white person, I'm not in the Asian family, or am I in like an honorary member of this Asian family?
Oh, how can we?
Am I a neighbor, or am I like one of Jim's dirty scallywag friends?
I think I like the scallywag friends, or a neighbor like Wilson from Home Improvement, where you only see like that part of his face.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. So it's like, oh, hi Wilson, hi. Never going to see my face. Never going to see my face.
Oh, I like that. Especially because I've been typecast as a scallywag friend too many times, so I like the idea of branching out.
You've been typecast as that.
So I like, when I first started stand-up and stuff, I used to do a relative amount of drugs. A relative amount? Like, I don't know. I don't know how you can quantify that.
Are we talking? Are we on the, like, you know, what kind of scale are we on? Are we on like a?
No, nothing too bad. But like every time I went to music festivals, I would do it. Every time I would go to like maybe a nightclub, I'd probably do something, you know. And then with the entertainment business, you know, sometimes you just like snowball into like a wild party, and it just sort of happens. But then also, like, looking back, I realized I would do a lot of drugs because of, like, you know, unresolved issues and trauma, like, you know, buried deep into my psyche. So I understand why I did it. I don't look back with any sadness or anything like that. But yeah, I did an amount. And so there was a moment in my career where I just kept looking at all the auditions I was getting, and it was always like, oh, you know, lanky criminal, you know, like that kind of stuff. And I said to my agent, I was like, bruv, like, why am I constantly getting this sort of stuff? And she was like, Eric, that's kind of what you're putting out. And I was like, oh yeah.
I want to be Robert De Niro. I'm going to do everything. But I mean, that's sort of the age. That's sort of like your equivalent of Asian actors that come in on the scene, especially like 20 years ago. It's like, can you put an accent? What was that, Master of None? That was literally the sort of the running gag in it, where he had to, like, he's going for a part as a taxi driver. Then he does it in his American accent. He goes, like, can you do an accent? So it's that typecasting thing.
Yeah.
I don't know how far you got into the podcast, the last episode, but I told the story. It's just true about the fact that one of my colleagues asked me to do a voiceover. No, I don't do.
You had to go more Indian, right?
Yeah.
No,
Asian. No, he did that on a whim.
Yeah, I'm self-destructive like that. So they just because it's Indian cricket, they wanted me with an English accent, BBC English, which is fine. But because it's actually a friend of mine who's running the boards, I gave him some options. And
I think that's smart, though. That's actually a smart move, because firstly, they can say, no, thank you, next, right? Like, they can just move you along. But also, you're showcasing your talent. I think that's actually a good move.
But my favorite thing was one of the editors who wasn't in on that day. She came in and I showed it to them. And it literally, I played the Indian accent version. She's heard the English one. And I love the fact that I offend people to the point where they just don't know whether to laugh or not. So she just stared and just her jaw dropped, and she's just trying not to laugh. But you know she wants to laugh, but doesn't, because again, it's politically correct climate.
So do you use people's white guilt against them?
Oh, all the time.
That's a good question.
And the brown guy gag I did in the last episode, that is exactly what it was. And they literally looked at me and they didn't know what to do. So, yeah, of course. I mean, I feel I can get away with it. That's why I do it.
Yeah, I'm quite lucky in the US having a British accent. I seem to get away with like so much more.
Oh yeah, you're
like,
so adorable.
Oh, he's British. He has no idea. Yeah. He's so charismatic.
Oh yeah. I mean, you can probably shout and swear at everybody. He goes, that's so adorable when he swears. Oh my god.
Well, I have done that a few times, and there was one gig where I took it too far, and I went, oh, I've learned a lesson.
So
the amount of gigs I've ruined. My bad. What was that? Egg white?
Are you sorry? Are you gigging quite a lot at the moment?
Not at the moment, actually. I mean, I've got one tonight. I've got a few coming up. It's a lot harder, I find, to get some good gigs in LA. Firstly, there's the distance. You know, there's a lot of driving to get from one gig to another, and the gigs here, so many of them are so bad. You know, you'll go to like
right?
No, it's bad in a different way. It's bad in a way that I feel like there's nothing to learn. In terms of like trying a new joke, and you're like, I've not learned really anything here. So some gigs will be just in front of comedians, and so, you know, I've seen some comedians make the whole room of comedians laugh, and then you put them in front of an actual audience, it doesn't translate. Because comedians are like these jaded people waiting for their turn to speak. So a lot of those gigs, I was like, well, I don't want to go to those. And then some other shows, you know, you turn up, there'd be maybe 5 people peppered in the audience. And when I say 5, they're not together. You know, like there'll be like one guy on his own, maybe 2 people together, another person on his own. And it'll be like in a sports bar where they haven't turned off their screens. And that's another thing. I'm like, okay, I don't know what I can learn from here. And I suppose that I'm trying to get that right balance between ego and self-worth, and it's quite a delicate balance. But at some point, after I've been doing this for now over a decade. Once you've done some shows with thousands of people, or you've done like just regular shows to like a nice 200 people, doing a show to 5 people, it's not that it's not fun. I've done it in Edinburgh. I genuinely can enjoy those shows, but to drive an hour and a half through traffic to then arrive at a bar where you're competing against the American football noise, there's nothing. And so a lot of those shows are like that.
Yeah.
And it's I think it's unbearable. And this is where my ego comes in, I suppose. It's unbearable once I've come from a place where I used to gig quite a lot, and I come here and they're like, who the f- are you? So understandably, I have to prove myself. But there's a part of me that goes, how much do I need to prove myself? And this is I remember saying this to like someone at the beginning. They were like, why don't you do those shows? And I was like, so many of you are working really hard to be invited to the Montreal Festival. I've done it twice. So surely that should translate to you just trusting me with a set. And what's difficult is that sometimes I'll go, okay, well, we'll trust you with a set. And they'll give me 2 minutes. And that's fine. That was actually a beautiful new challenge, right? Because normally, even as an open micer, you'll at least start with like 5, right?
Yeah.
But they'll give you 2 minutes, and they'll go, "Oh, that was really good. We'll get you back on next year." There's so many. There's no like way to develop. LA's so difficult.
Is that the main difference between like UK and US, the sort of comedy scene?
I think that with London and New York, I think it's a meritocracy. So if you do well, you go up. While LA, it's different. I still can't quite put the word on it, but it's.
Are these jobbing actors?
You have to be. A lot of them are actors, and I see why. You get, it's like an audition. You never know who's in the audience, and I mean, things in LA can change drastically very quickly, and one thing that someone once said to me was they compared New York and LA, and they said in New York it's about what you've done, it's about what you're bringing to the table because of what you've done, while LA it's about what you're doing now, right now.
Oh, okay.
And I sort of see that as truth. Like in New York, you can arrive and go like, oh look, I had this award and I did this, and look at all these beautiful shows I've done. And they'll go, okay, so you know what you're doing. We'll trust you with some shows. While, in LA, it's like, sorry, who are you now? What have you done now?
Yeah, it sounds like there's a multi-hyphenate structure in LA. And
that's a great word, and you're gonna have to define it for the layman. For egg white, egg white didn't understand what that meant.
I've got no idea. I mean, I switched off when you started talking.
I've got to define it for myself. So in London, a lot of the stand-up comics that I've known and met and known, they don't really have any other skills apart from they just want to do stand-up, and comedy and all that. But in LA, it just sounds like what you're doing. You're writing, directing, acting, as well as doing stand-up, and you're doing all these various things there. So you sort of have to branch out.
It's strange.
That's a big business card,
grateful. It's a big business card. Like now, for example, sometimes I've introduced myself as an artist because there's just so many different things now that I do. And so it's quite funny because I'm actually grateful for the fact that it became so hard, because all of a sudden I was like, okay, well, I'll write a script, and turns out that script was pretty good. And okay, well, I'll try and direct. And I directed, and it was crap. It was so bad. But I learned so much. And I was like, oh, I really like directing. And I don't think that any of that would have happened if I had stayed in the UK. And I think one of the great things, but paradoxically challenging things for comedians in the UK is you can gig so regularly that you forget to do other things. You'll wake up every day just working on your material and forget that you could be doing this. While in LA you actually don't have a choice. You're not given the choice.
Because I know
go on, Wokie.
Oh no, I was just saying there's a guy called Don Bizwas, and he's been
I
gigging
love
for
Don
years.
Bizwas.
I've spoken to him a couple of times. I've seen some of his shows. They're brilliant, but he's literally been gigging for so long. He's only gone professional this year after when I first met him in 2008 or 9 or something.
Yeah. Well, I started in 2008, and I'm pretty sure I met him the first week I started stand-up at the Lion's Den in King's Cross.
Lion's Den. Basically, to give you some backstory, I did one stand-up, my first ever stand-up. I walked on stage like Jimi Hendrix, had my material in my mind. I spoke into the microphone. True story. I just heard my voice come back to me, and I walked off without saying anything else. After saying hello.
Hang on. No, that's not the full story. You didn't just walk off without saying anything. You froze, and then you ended up saying,
yes.
what was the word you ended up saying?
Penis. So it was. I found out later you shouldn't do rude gags, and I became really self-conscious. I actually got heckled as I walked off because everyone. This is North London. This is the North London club, which everyone used to go to, and they said, "No, finish your set. I was too distraught. My friend went up and did 3 minutes and smashed it. Then we went to the Lion's Den, and I did a big non-performance there as well, while my mate smashed it for 5 minutes.
Yeah, but these non-performances, there's still something to learn.
Yeah, trauma.
That was the most traumatic gig ever.
Do you do stand-up?
Yeah,
well?
Yeah, yes.
When did you start?
About the same time. It's about 2008. I think. In fact, I think I might have been on the same bill in the Lion's Den.
Oh, amazing!
Very a long time.
Because like some people, like our paths just never meet. Like there's so many comedians out there, and some people you just you happen to never gig with, or like you gigged with like a decade ago, and it's I do love that about our industry actually, but it's
yeah, and there's always people kind of dipping in and out as well, trying it on there. So there's always people to meet.
Yeah, I know a fair few who did it. So I know a fair few who did it for a few, for a couple of years, and they basically did it. But the learning experience for me was I don't have the kind of like bursting like need to do it. A lot of stand-up comics are obsessive, and they will go on night after night. They'll do great, they'll not do great. And they just have this, I've just spotted the fact that they just have this need to be on stage to get that energy in, and I won't dissect.
Yeah, so one thing I experienced, I did hypnotherapy a few years back, and it worked really well. It literally, I woke up a different person. I was healed. It was amazing. And what was strange with that came a wave of self-love that I hadn't experienced before. As in, I was genuinely comfortable with who I was for the first time. And I mean, maybe it felt like ever. And what then happened with that was I lost this fire, this desire to be on stage. And it took me a while to work out that actually the reason I used to go on stage before was because just one wave of laughter felt like this love that I hadn't received as a kid or whatever, whatever was missing from my childhood, I was getting it finally. And as soon as I healed from in my mind, I didn't need to go on stage anymore, which was really beautiful experience, right? But it also not delayed. Well, yeah, kind of delayed. It delayed me getting back on stage because all of a sudden I was like, well, what's my reason for going back up there? And it's really interesting. And now, the reason is people need to laugh. People have a 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, and we're the clowns that can actually provide them with a good night and a good bit of relief and entertainment and education.
I think it's more really important now because you look at just what's going on. I mean, even just how many prime ministers we've just had in the last week. The war in the Ukraine, post COVID.
Oh, you know what? I will say Trump, this, right?
All that kind of stuff.
The old Liz Truss thing. I didn't pay too much attention to what was going on in the UK. I tend to watch global news I tend to watch, news from all over the world.
You'll hear my trailer.
And but one thing I will say, and I think this speaks to the symbiotic relationship between performer and audience as well, is a performer will always do better if the audience are just there to have fun and they want to have a good time, and they show that by looking at the stage and actually maybe laughing a little bit harder than they need to, even if it's at the beginning a little bit fake. And that's why a good MC will get that engineered. And I feel like that has to be the same for leaders. Like, I don't know who Liz Truss is. I'm not conservative, nor am I really Labour. I don't really know where I am because of this, my nomadic childhood. But a leader needs the backing of the people. And if a people keep going, well, you're going to right? At some point, while they're busy, like, backhanding all the insults and heckles from, like, their own party, after a couple of weeks, they're like, well, you haven't done any work. No, I haven't done any work because you're trying to bring me down. Like, at some point, can you just choose a leader, whether you like it or not, and just support that person? It's...
Oh, yeah, it's all self-destructive.
I genuinely felt bad. Oh, she's only been there for 44 days. Yeah, for 44 days, all I saw was people going, what?
But she's still taking the full annual salary. That's what the Daily Mail are taking home from this.
Yeah, but you would take it as well. So shut up. I want an annual salary for done nothing.
Yeah.
Well, destroyed the economy. Yay! Can I have my check,
she's
please?
the only one that's been for a king and a queen.
That's true.
So,
yes, yeah. And no one can take that away from her. So
especially that clip where Charles just went, oh dear. that's gold. Comedy gold.
So
Charlie.
on the circuit, to bring it back to the angle, the woke angle. So have you noticed, are there kind of, things that you can't say has the scene changed when you're doing kind of like your gigs? Are there things you can and cannot say, or audiences, different? Are they kind of slightly more aggressive? Are they kind of wanting different things?
If you compare it to 10 years ago to today, I think probably be a good kind of like barometer.
I suppose I can only compare it really to my own perspective and what I'm willing to do on stage, because what you can do in LA will be different to New York and Montreal and the UK. So I suppose I have a geographical perspective that's maybe different to someone who only has, let's say, one territory. I also do my shows in French. So I also have France, and I also have French Canada, which the two same languages, but two very different reactions. So it's difficult to say. I'm not also gigging enough, or famous is not the right word, but I'm just not regularly gigging enough to truly get enough results, right? But I suppose what happened with all of the either cancel culture stuff is highlight potentially the power of words and our responsibility when we're on stage to better formulate a joke. And so I think that you can joke about absolutely anything. I do. I have done some very risky jokes in my time. In this year, I spoke about certain things that I don't want to say on the podcast, because on the podcast it could, for example, this is something that I have to think about, right?
I get taken out of context.
It could get taken out of context. It could get like a little soundbite, right? While if I do,
because we would do that as well. We would do that and put it all over TikTok and Instagram.
But if like I was to go on stage with a well-crafted and balanced thing of something that I did, for example, that I was maybe ashamed of when I was a kid or whatever, then okay, you can take a soundbite, but on my channel there'll be the full video. It'll be well constructed. So if anything, it's made me more excited to say outrageous things.
I know, because we're sort of alluding to that. Because I was in Edinburgh just for like a long weekend this year, and obviously that's when the Jerry Sadowitz thing kicked off.
Yeah, I heard about that briefly. So firstly, as an audience member, if you haven't done your research with the comedians that you're watching, it's on you. Jerry Sadowitz, everyone knows what he's like, right?
We all know.
I haven't seen his show, but from what I gather,
it's quite
it's
quite
almost
risque.
not like a comedy show. It's more like almost an experiment that he was.
Yes, it's shock
doing.
theatre as well.
And I think what is challenging, and therefore it needs to be handled by a great performer, which I'm not saying that Jerry Sadowitz is or isn't, but you know, if you're treading the line between shock theatre and actually just gathering a public that are full of hate, that line is very, very challenging to play along. And you know, like for example, the pub landlord Al, right? There was actually, it was a beautiful play between he was speaking for a voice that felt like they were disenfranchised and stuff like that, while also making fun of them. And I don't know, it seemed to be, it's difficult, but he's playing it properly. While
I mean, it's well written. That's the thing.
The laughs on an Al Murray show are different if you go and see it in the Soho Theatre to if you go and see it in Bedford. Speaking from experience,
right? But that's what I'm saying. So it's very difficult to know, you know, what you can and can't say. You know, I've got some jokes that are risky about, or any sorts of jokes that are risky. And let's say if there's a joke that's risky about one topic, and then all of a sudden I'm presented with an audience that would likely be more offended by that joke, it's my responsibility to either do it or not. But it's also my responsibility to make sure that I'm happy with my performance. So I often will still say the joke because I want to walk away going, I'm proud of myself. I can hold my head high. Now, the joke has to be good.
Yeah, I know, very true.
If the joke is good and you are in a comedy club and you're offended, that's on you. Go see a therapist. I once did a joke. It's not even a joke. It was a true story. And I don't want to share too much about it, but it was essentially, if you listen to what was being said, it was very much a story about unison, about how, you know, we're all the same, but we're all different. We all have different tastes and stuff like that. But ultimately, that's what makes us whole and unified. And someone was so angry at my show afterwards. They were screaming at my face with the finger pointed, you know, that kind of stuff. And I'm breathing, and all I can see is a hurt child. Right, it's an adult man, but I could see the hurt child in him. And what happened was he heard me make fun of something, which in its construction is sandwiched between me, you know, like the shit sandwich, you know, you offer a compliment, you know, it's structured in a way that I know what I'm doing, but all he heard was that. And it sounded like an insult where the audience were laughing. And then this is what happens. You can see in their faces sometimes. The trauma then gets echoed in their head. And that's it. You're muted. You're muted for the rest of the show. They can't hear you. And then what they do is they play the memories of their trauma in their head while you're on stage. And they associate that trauma, that memory being echoed with you. And then they blame you for it. It's lazy. It's annoying. We're not your therapists. At the same time, so do I feel responsible? Yeah, of course I do. I don't want to hurt anyone with my comedy, but I can't please everyone. And even his friends, you can see his friends were like looking at me and looking at him, and they were looking at me as if to say, sorry, I don't think he understood the joke. Right? Like, you could tell. I do feel responsible, and I think it is important to be aware of the effects on people.
Hi, I'm a completely disinterested Simon Cowell. If you've been intrigued by any of the stand-up comedy you've seen since lockdown finished, maybe the issue is not the comedian actually making the joke, it's actually you. So I suggest therapy. I don't need therapy because I used to date Sanita.
I mean, I think Jerry Sadowitz was aware of his audience because his audience are the same audience he's had for like decades. But for some reason, a few months ago, when he did his show, you know, certain people in the audience just offended with the stuff he's saying. Like he flashed someone, then he made some racially contentious jokes, which even for me, if I was there, I wouldn't have been offended by those jokes, because that's what you get with that kind of like presence, essentially.
Yeah, if you're going to go see a Tarantino film and then you're surprised that there's like blood and gunshots,
Yeah.
it's like, well, go see the other catalog. Go see his catalog of work. You know, if you go see a Christopher Nolan film and you're annoyed that you're confused about time when you come out of it, like, go see his films. Like, it's annoying. I think the people that are to blame for the Jerry Sadowitz thing is the organization, because you've allowed a comedian that you know does stuff like this, and then you cancel his show. That is pathetic. I think it's pathetic. It's maybe a harsh word, but I feel like the organization should have the back of the artists. And if you've said yes to hiring an artist, that's on you.
It is obviously the Fringe Festival as well, right? So, you know, you're going to see a lot of the different things, and you're not going to like a lot of them. And some things will be challenging, some things will be, you know, nice, some things will be nasty, some things will be funny things, and some things will be, you know, like it will basically question. And isn't that the point of, like, you know, the Fringe Festival?
But overall, I think it'll be good for Jerry Sadowitz, because it was great promotion. He can now do his show wherever he goes. But no, I think it was the responsibility of the organization.
So do you think would you ever do something deliberately so close to the mark to kind of, you know, almost get to that point of like cancelled, and then you can kind of then have this is the joke that got me cancelled?
Would I do that? I'm aware that I throw wrenches in my works. Like when I improvise on stage and it goes really well, you know, would I prefer it to go well for 20 minutes, or would I prefer it to go well for 10 minutes, really mess it up for 5 to try and get it back for the last 5 minutes? I prefer that kind, because it creates a bigger atmosphere in the audience. Not only for 5 minutes are they like, how is he going to get it back? If they're on my side, how is he going to get back? And if they don't like me, how am I going to get them on board? But also that to go from that to a successful last 5 minutes requires a level of skill that I enjoy, but I think audiences enjoy. And I learned that from when I did the Latitude Festival, 2010, I think, or 11. It was me. It was competition. Me, James A. Caster, Ramesh Ranganathan. God, it was a few,
don't mention Ramesh to Wokie.
Yeah.
It's like the noose around his neck.
You'll be glad to hear, although obviously it hasn't translated to TV gigs, but I won the competition. Woo! And I asked, Sean Walsh was one of the guys that was judging on it, and he said to me, "Oh, do you know why you won?" And I was like, "No, I'm actually surprised." And the reason I was surprised is because everyone else, one guy struggled. It was 5,000 audience. I don't know how many people. It was quite a lot. Everyone smooth, good throughout, just solid gags, you know. And Sean said, "You were shit at the beginning. You came on and it was crap." But the fact that you took it from that to then having won them over by the end, like the whole, you know, it was a really lovely feeling.
35,000 people.
Yeah.
But that's the capacity. So, and they were all watching you.
All me.
No pressure.
But that skill to go from having none of them on board to getting them all on board, that always resonated with me. That always stuck with me. That, you know, it's a good skill to have, and it, I think, makes for a better piece of theatre.
Yeah.
So would I? So now, to answer your question, would I say things outrageously on purpose? Very likely, but it would just depend, because there's also, like, I'm not just a comedian. My heart wants to be like, you know, I want to provide relief for everyone. I have a frustrating amount of empathy for everyone that I tend to always be, not always be, but I'm always on the fence because, you know, if there's a good guy and a bad guy, you can always find out how that bad guy became that bad guy. You know, there's always like a reason for like everyone's behaviors. And you know, I myself could have been triggered very easily in my 20s by certain words. You know, I was a bit homeless when I was a teenager. So anyone that handled homeless comedy in a bad way upset me. If you did it funny, yeah, great. But if you did it like, and you didn't know what you're talking about, that used to upset me. Now that's on me.
If it was lazy comedies, that's what triggered you. If it was well constructed, you wouldn't be triggered.
And I think that if we're just talking about on stage as a comedian, I think anything can be discussed. But you know, like when you meet someone who's just and you're you know, the hair just goes on your neck, you know, like it stands up on your neck, and you're just getting a bad feeling. You know, the thing that people say, it's called gut instinct. You know, when you just get a gut instinct about someone. I think that you can tell that from people on stage. You know, there's some people say things and you can hear that little tone of malice. You can hear that genuine hatred maybe towards a group of people or whatever, and it just translates.
I've seen that.
Right? You know, people, you can, it doesn't seem right. I think it's all about the approach, the delivery. Where does your heart lie? And sometimes it can be so brief, and if the audience doesn't pick up on it, like not every audience member will pick up on it, so that's part of the risk. But sometimes, you know, you can say something really inappropriate, and all it takes is just one quick look towards the audience, one cheeky little smile, just to go, you know, like, I love you all, right? You know this, yeah?
Yeah.
Like,
well, we're on the same level, yeah.
Yeah.
So that brings us nicely into a feature which we do, where I try and prove that Wokie doesn't know what he's talking about, because I'm nice like that. So, and we call it Jim or Jimmy, which is basically where I read out Jimmy Carr and Jim Davidson material jokes straight, and Wokie has to guess which one they are to see if he can. So I've got a few, and so if we would you like to play Jim or Jimmy as the first ever guest?
I'd love to play it.
Yeah. we can insert some sort of chintzy theme tune. Yeah.
Is it racist? Is it irony? Is it racist? Is it irony? Jim or Jimmy?
Yeah, my chair sinks down below as I get the, you know, it's basically a woke thing.
So I'll just read them completely straight, and then you have to say if it's Jim or Jimmy. Yeah. So I'm a modern man. I've got no problem buying tampons, but apparently they're not a proper present.
Do you blurt it out, or do you put your hand up? How does this work?
Just whatever. You shout. Yeah.
Jimmy Carr.
That's Jimmy Carr. So you think that's Jimmy Carr? Wokie?
Yeah. Sorry. I would say that's Jim Davidson. This is where it is. So I tried to analyze the joke as well. I think it's just very old school 70s comedy. So I'm going for Jim Davidson.
Okay. Well. Fortunately, our guest knows what he's talking about. So you were right. It's a Jimmy Carr joke.
Based on what you said, okay. But I think you know what you're talking about as well. Is Jimmy Carr will have, if anything, more inappropriate jokes. I mean, did you see the joke that he had for the roast of Pete? I can't remember what his name is. The SNL guy. And there was a few jokes about his dad or something who
the 9/11 gag.
Yeah, and he was like, we're not going to do any jokes about, we're not going to do any roasts about Jim's dad. That was done 10 years ago. Or something like that. Like, he handled it.
Oh no,
it was so good.
Oh no, his entire performance. I've watched that multiple times because that was the roast of Rob Lowe, and they went. Who's that far right female commentator? I've forgotten her name, and all of them ripped into her. But Jimmy Carr was. I don't think I could say some of this out loud, but he just laid into her. The Kentucky Derby. Her face looked like a Kentucky Derby.
So the roast arena is already like all gloves are off. Everything's permitted kind of thing. But I also think, and this is again the difference, right? Jim Davidson already has a reputation of this underlying bigotry with him, right? And it's not underlying, right? Sometimes it's quite obvious. But as soon as everyone tarnishes you with that brush, which you painted with yourself, then certain jokes will land differently. While Jimmy, he says things that are way worse. But he's a comedian. He's almost so much more comedian first. I don't think Jim Davis is a comedian first. He might be a bigot first. I don't know, right? So Jimmy Carr is a comedian first. But, you can tell that,
I think it's the delivery. Obviously, the whole point of the game is Egg White does it very flat, and I have to see if it's which way it leans. If it's angry comedy, or whether it is just a cleverly constructed joke, basically.
And one thing as well for any listener that isn't like us doing comedy, I could see why that you could compare that one to Jim Davidson joke, but those jokes are also really good peppered amongst other things. Like the slightly 1970s, 1980s, take my wife kind of joke actually still have a lot of value in modern day if you're sandwiching them, if they're sandwiched with like more modern jokes, because then again, that's the wave, the theater wave of like.
Absolutely.
I mean.
Before Egg White does his next Jim or Jimmy, have you seen, Eric, the in fact, should you have a code name? Because it's Eric, woke Asian guy, Egg White. Should we call you the typecast guy?
Oh no, I don't want to be typecast as a typecast guy.
Okay, Eric.
That's the fractal. So I'm stuck in a fractal. I'm typecast as a typecast guy.
What would be your dream? What would be your dream kind of, like sort of, you want to move away from the sort of the dodgy kind of Cockney?
I'm meeting quite a lot. I'm working with a coach. I'm trying to gain a sort of action movie body.
Fantastic.
So I don't know. So something along those lines, bad boy. The naughty man. I don't know what I'm talking about.
So I think in the sitcom, then I think there's definitely a part for like Katie Hopkins' bad boy lover.
Oh yes. I would punish her so much.
So before we go into the next Jim or Jimmy, have you ever seen the Chevy Chase roast? I think it's 2002. It's all of it's on YouTube. It is so bad they've never shown it again because everyone knows Chevy Chase is not a very nice person in real life. That roast, everybody literally got personal with him, and it got so bad. I mean, they literally were making fun of his failed career and everything. I've watched it about 4 or 5 times because it is it's just really. And right at the end of it, you could see he's a broken man. Right at the end of it, it's like I understand.
Some of those roasts are really brutal. They're really brutal.
Yeah, they're close to the bone. So, well, next Jim or Jimmy?
1-0. So you've got to save some face. Treat them mean, keep them keen. If that were true, wouldn't the Jews adore the Germans?
Oh, that's a good one. And here's why it's a good one, right? Because I can hear Jimmy Carr saying this, and again, in the flow of things. Depending on where it's aligned in the show. Can you say that joke again?
Okay, so treat them mean, keep them keen. If that were true, wouldn't the Jews simply adore the Germans?
Yeah, I'm going for Jimmy Carr, man.
I'm going for Jim Davidson again. It just feels very Jim Davidson.
Oh.
And I like the fact that Eric actually analyzes it. I just go one way or the other, then Egg White just makes fun of me, which is fine.
Yeah, but
I could do it. I could live with it.
He's an artiste. You just stand up on stage once and just said penis. So you're just vulgar.
Yeah, but also, does the vocation have to provide balance? And maybe he knows the answer, but he
doesn't. No, he doesn't.
I definitely don't. He will genuinely not know
I don't have Jim Davidson's voice in my mind, which is one of the reasons why I can't, like, you know, like I can read a book by Stephen Fry and actually read it as Stephen Fry. You know, like that's one of the beauties of having people that just in your life so much, they're like almost parental figures. But I don't have his voice, but I'm just aware of his, you know, bigoty flavors, right? So with that joke in his mouth would be terrible. And this is, I suppose, the NRA argument, right? A good guy with a gun or a bad guy with a gun. Right? There is a difference. And if that joke is a gun, you know, if you give it to someone that can't handle it properly, they'll fire it. And
this is why I like to play the game, because he doesn't really think before he speaks.
Story of my life.
You and Jim Davidson will get on perfectly in this pilot.
Well, we're thinking it's going to be like a beautiful thing. It's going to be, you know, like some kind of Disney movie. I think this one might be quite obvious. I mean, but because we're seeing as we had two from Jimmy Carr, or is that a curveball?
So be smart.
Little Zucky or Zuki has to walk 15 miles just to fetch water, and I couldn't help thinking ... she should move.
So I've actually seen that one before. It's a great joke. It's another Jimmy Carr joke.
It's a Jimmy.
But basically, I realised actually that the Jim Davidson jokes that I have are quite obvious, because they mention things like Jordan and the SAS. So which
yeah, but the thing is, Jimmy Carr's like got a whole Bible of jokes, right? He could do every topic, so I wouldn't be surprised if he has jokes about any of that.
I know, he probably has, but no one else, you know, bigs up the SAS, which they should.
He works like a 9 to 5. He just sits down, writes, you know, for like 8 hours a day, or did do on the way up. So okay, one last one. In fact, there's two, because they're slightly linked. So, has anyone done DIY? Can anyone who has ever tried DIY please tell me, hand on heart, that they don't have any admiration for the work that Fritzl did?
I'm going for Jimmy Carr in that one.
For the listener, we're talking about Joseph Fritzl.
So my first reaction was Jim Davidson. Only because
you're gonna win this one. Oh.
Only because, again, Fritzl jokes, I'm sure Jimmy Carr's got them. And in fact, that the premise is very much a Jimmy Carr thing as well. But has anyone ever done that? I think it's the way the question is phrased to the audience doesn't sound like a very Jimmy Carr way of introducing that joke. So I feel like that's a Jim Davidson one. But maybe I'm wrong.
I'm going to do the second bit as well. So Fritzl was described as the most evil man in Austrian history. Not even close. Hitler.
Well, that's Jim Davidson.
I would say Jim Davidson as well.
Drum roll. You had it. Well, I mean, you still won, because literally Wokie's got no points, but they were both Jimmy Carr jokes.
They were both Jimmy Carr.
Yeah.
Oh.
So what have we learned from this today? We're it's the all.
But you see, because the thing is that second part, all of a sudden, I didn't have in my mind with that Jimmy Carr tempo, because I had made my mind up about the first one. So that's the. Yeah. I love how I poisoned my own mind, because I had made my decision about that first one. Because now, like, you say, okay, that's Jimmy Carr, and I go, okay, yeah, I can read it as Jimmy Carr. It's.
But I think that's what people do when you know, like they have a predetermined kind of idea about, oh, I can't go and see that because of this and this, and I don't like that because of this thing that it said, and then you actually end up going, oh my god, this is like the best thing ever. And that's the best way to be. And that is not what woke Asian guy does. He basically makes a decision, usually based on Radio 4, or the Guardian, and
very woke.
And if they don't like it, then he doesn't like it, and
they're dead to me.
My whole reason for being is to just to prove him wrong.
I know it is really difficult to know. I don't even know what the definition of woke really is, right? Because
neither do I.
It's so challenging. Like,
don't admit that.
Oh, sorry.
Like with the news and stuff, I feel like I'm pretty good because I'll watch like some global news. Like I'll generally watch Al Jazeera, and then I'll be like, okay, but should I balance that genuinely with, like, let's say Fox News? Should I balance, like? And you're saying no, but then you're cutting out such a huge portion of people that genuinely believe these things, right? So, like,
I don't know if you've seen any GB News, right? So GB
no, I haven't actually been.
You've heard of it? It's a new news channel.
I saw advertisement when I popped into the UK this year, but I haven't actually been in the country for it.
So normally, traditional news, you've got, they basically tell you this is what happened, and from this can kind of this is going to have a why it's happened and possible like reasons as to or predictions of what's going to happen, and it's got like a little package in VT. GB News is basically just opinion, and I think it's more Fox News or like Piers Morgan style. Just
all their presenters are anti-woke, basically. Because we don't believe in this woke culture. We're gonna freedom of speech is what they
Lawrence Fox fronted kind of
and John Cleese's got his own show on it as well. So
I heard that. I heard that through your episode. In fact,
so the other thing is to answer to mention also that's the reason why I read the Daily Mail is just to see what I read the Guardian as Egg White keeps annoying me about, but if I read the Daily Mail, I can see what the other side is saying, and you can see the insanity. And and a lot of the stuff they do is coded as well. You could just see the actual triggering mechanisms that they have in their articles and the headlines as well. I was like, okay.
But here's the mad thing, though, to provide balance. What you just said could easily be said by someone who reads the Daily Mail and sometimes reads the Guardian for balance, right? Like, once you're so entrenched in a perspective, it's so difficult to see otherwise. Like, and I'm equally there, not necessarily with politics or news, but actually, well, kind of, because of my nomadic childhood and having lived everywhere, I don't really abide by sort of one political view, which I think is healthy. But then I'll also go but I am that reason because I'm so entrenched in the fact that I'm that person. And so it's so, this is where again my heart and my empathy goes to people, because I go, those people poisoned by a certain news outlet, and it doesn't even have to be poisoned, right? If you just read too much of the Guardian and you don't read any other news outlet, then you are the Guardian's little bitch, right? So
correct.
But then at the same time, you have to choose something at some point. Like, I can't watch every news outlet like the Back to the Future 2 screens where there's like 24 screens playing at the same time. I can't do that. So I have to. So I've just chosen Al Jazeera. For no reason. I was like, oh, the global. They're talking. It seems good. But then I'm like, but they still have their
agenda.
The I'm looking. Agenda. They still have their agenda. So then I'm going, oh fuck! Where do I get my news from? And there's this beautiful quote. I can't remember who says it, but it's something along the lines of, "If you don't watch the news, you're uninformed, and if you do watch the news, you're misinformed," which encapsulates it beautifully. A part of me doesn't want to live now in my daily life without, let's say, a little bit of news, knowing what goes on in the world. And then every single time I imbibe some news, I go, "Is it true?"
Yeah.
I mean,
fact check everything.
Who's got the time, and also just can be bothered to, if you read something, you go, hang on, I just need to check 5 different sources to fact check this to see if it's actually true.
Yeah. I ain't got time for that shit. And which then brings me back to, like, let's say GB kind of stuff. I understand why people just want to be told what's going on by someone. Like, if, for example, you grow up with a particular celebrity who you like for 20 years, and then all of a sudden they become part of GB News or whatever, you'll go, oh, well, I've been trusting them for 20 years. I've been listening to their podcast for 20 years. I might as well do that. And there is some comfort in just being someone's going, hey, just so you know, that's what I think the reality of things is. Yeah. Because at some point, and I don't know if this is an age, a rite of passage thing, or, you know, as we get older, but at some point we all get it. No one gets it.
Oh yeah, that definitely, yeah.
Right? No one knows. No one knows anything. If you break everything down, no one knows anything, and you just have to choose, isn't it? That is, mad.
I mean, basically, if you've just completely described the podcast, because we know nothing.
But just a
quick make sense of it.
We are living proof that no one knows anything.
But we're trying to make sense of it.
Through it.
Yeah, we're working through it, Egg White. But just to segue, same but different. Did you see that's is in LA, this stand-up comic and an open mic circuit? She did a joke, and it's like someone started asking, oh, you didn't vote Trump, and she was like having a back and forth, and they actually threw a beer at her. Then she picked the beer up and drank it, because someone in the audience was like offended. It's just basically, it's a Trump, anti-Trump kind of thing.
Was that ending? Was that actually true, or was that or that's the kind of story that if that happens to you, someone throws a beer at you, you kind of go, oh, and then walk off stage. But then you think, hang on, I can use this, right? So actually, I'm gonna then come back with the best one-liner down that.
It sounds accurate. It sounds accurate because, you know, if the comedian in her is powerful enough, that you would just use that weapon immediately as a joke.
I know. Well, to be honest, everything worked out for her because she ended up on the Jimmy Kimmel show doing a stand-up act on that.
Oh, that's nice.
I thought you were saying Jimmy Kimmel show.
So what you should do, get a friend in LA to throw a can at you, film it, then you sort of have a back and forth, and
I'm all about viral. Organic, man. I'm all about organic.
Okay.
Organic beer. Just make it organic lager.
Oh, organic lager, yeah. Now, things will happen organically. Someone's going to throw something at me eventually.
Well, it can't be worse than Jerry Sadowitz. You know, he got punched out, didn't he?
When someone throws something at you, you'll be ready.
Yeah, hopefully.
Skills like a ninja. Eric Lampaert, thank you very much for coming on our show. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
And for any listeners, I just want to shout out to my YouTube channel. I make some weird shit on there. So that's it. Just come and check out my YouTube channel. Make some fun videos.
Woke Asian Guy.
And Egg White.
And special guest, Eric Lampaert.